how to optimize what you glean from resumes, how to read between the lines, and how to find more like this one. Please welcome Shally on stage.
Just kidding. It's still not working, though. Still not working. Now it's working? Now it's working. All right. Okay, so you ever get a hiring manager that hands you a resume and says, can you find more people like this? That ever happen? Or they give you like the name of somebody that they used to work with, and they're like, if you could find this person, right? You ever get that? So there's a challenge with that, and the challenge is that very often what they like about that particular resume isn't in the skills keywords. It's something else. And that's what we're going to talk about now. That's not the right one. It's the, yeah, it's 1620. It's the 431. That one. Oh, the title is, I got it. All right, run it. Just run it. Load it up. Yeah, sorry, forget that. The title is wrong. Right slide, wrong title. Shit happens. All right, so why are we talking about this? Because this is probably the number one way in which we mess up. We mess up because we go out and start looking for all the right people in all the right places using the wrong keywords. In other words, you're going to the right databases and you're looking for the right kinds of people, but the keywords that you're using are not the right ones. So this is what we're going to talk about today, is how to select the right keywords. And we're going to use the example that I mentioned as people were coming in. You get a hiring manager that says, here's a resume of the perfect candidate. Find me more like this one. Both of those scenarios, which are kind of hand in hand. The critical point of failure happens at the intake. How many of you, raise your hand if you currently are involved in the intake process? Raise your hand if you talk to the hiring manager and are responsible for the intake. Okay. So for those of you that are not, why aren't you doing that? It's a legitimate question. Why aren't you? Are you too far removed? Are you manager, supervisor? Is it just... Okay, so who does the intake? The recruiter? And are they doing a good job? You don't need to answer that. So the point is, at this critical stage, when we're trying to understand what the hiring manager wants, is when we almost always get it wrong, and we end up looking for the keywords that are in the requisition that are often not the keywords that appear in the resumes of people that get hired. Let me illustrate this by giving you an example. How many times have you seen someone get hired whose resume matches not at all the job description? Why do you think that happens? What? They're not good resumes. Is that what you said? They're not good resumes? Oh yeah, actually, that's a pretty good one. Why else do you think that happens? The resume is not very good. I like that.
Sometimes it happens when I do put the keywords, I will find my own organization profile.
You know why? Because that job title only exists for your company. Like, where's Facebook? The programming ninja or whatever, or technical Yahoo or whatever. It always, you search for that and you'll only find your own people. So yeah, that and a number of other reasons. Well, what happens is when we rely on the requirements, if you're lucky enough to have direct access to the hiring manager, you can remedy this. But if you don't have that access, you've got to figure it out on your own. So what I want to talk about today is what happens when you don't have that access. If you have access to the hiring manager, ask the questions about what it is that they want using the intake form or the intake process that's probably been established by your company. And that's what this document lists here. If you don't have an intake process, take note. You want to find relevant organizations, similar job titles, similar companies, not competitors, but companies that hire similar people. There's a difference, right? The two companies may not compete for the same market share, but they hire the same kind of talent. For example, A bank and KPMG are not competitors, but they both hire the same kind of talent. Coca-Cola and KPMG are not competitors, but they both have treasury, and they both have people who handle corporate treasuries. See what I mean? Competitors. Also, you want to bring examples of positions that were previously filled. So when you're having a meeting with the hiring manager, bring a rec that's similar to the rec that, as close as you can, to the rec that you're going to be working with. And along with it, guess what you bring? Resumes of semifinalists. Why? Because of the next step. We're going to use those resumes to find that more like this one pattern. Okay. So you're going to bring recs that were filled for the same or similar position, and you're going to bring the resumes associated with that rec. You'll bring lists of keywords, relevant technologies, niches, online communities, etc. And what I want you to do is I want you to have, during that meeting, have a conversation with the hiring manager. Hey, as I prepared for this meeting, in my research preparing for this meeting, I came across these job titles. If I read them to you, can you tell me if any of these are relevant or not? And then you're reading them, the job titles, and they'll say, oh yeah, that one, keep that one. No, that's not the same. That's this, that's the other. You know what almost always happens at the end of that very brief 30-second discussion? They go, oh, you know, I didn't think of, boom, they give you the one that's on the resume, that's like the one that they want to hire, that wasn't in the rec. But if you didn't do that brainstorming exercise, they would never have given it to you. Here's another illustration. If I ask a hiring manager who our competitors are, what is the answer that I'm going to get? Facebook. Ask a hiring manager, who's our competitors? They're going to say what? LinkedIn, Twitter, Google, Yelp, right? Which is what is listed on any financial analysis database, right? But really, are you hiring from Google? Not so much. Where do you hire from more likely?
So for India market, it's a lot of e-commerce sites.
That are not Google, right? The reason is that typically when a big employer is hiring, the highest percentage of hires that they'll get are from smaller employers. People from small companies leave to go to the big company. They want the job title, they want the salary and benefits, they want the pension, they want the stability, they want the development, you know, they want the coaching. The other way is also true. When startups are hiring, where do they take? Big companies. Because they want to go back to the garage days and feel like they're king of the hill and they want to be the big shot on campus. Always happens that way. So Facebook doesn't hire from Google very much. Now, I'm here to tell you that when I was at Google, I recruited the shit out of Microsoft. And when I was at Microsoft, I recruited the shit out of Google, right? But that doesn't mean I made a lot of placements. It was just part of the process. Most of my hires were from all kinds of companies that were 10 employees, 20 employees, 30 employees. And those companies don't use the same job titles, they use the same keywords, they don't use the same technology. They're not competitors. So you bring that list of keywords and organizations and job titles and companies and synonyms, and you let the hiring manager cross off the ones that you like, that they like, or add to the ones that you've missed, and now you have a very complete list of the keywords that you should be searching for that isn't the one that you started with. Because if you go out there and start looking for software architect in Google, you're only going to find a certain amount of resumes. You're only going to find the few software architects that are out there that are from Google. It also does one very important key thing. It puts you in a position of immediate value. It demonstrates your value in the process. If, by contrast, you show up to the meeting with the hiring manager with an empty piece of paper and a pen, and you say, so, Mr. or Mrs. Hiring Manager, what is it that you would like? Yes, great, yeah, and would you like some fries with that? You're taking an order. You add no value. Don't be surprised when you lose your job or get outsourced, because you add no value. Instead, show up with a list of organizations. Here's what my research turned up. Here's the kinds of people that we've hired in the past. Here's some of the salary ranges that we've seen. Here's some of the offers that we've made in the past. By the way, I'll tell you this is a really good time to give them the bad news. Sometimes you have a hiring manager that's giving you pie in the sky expectations. They want to hire top talent. We want the best in the industry. We want the best of the top 1% of the industry. Ask the question, okay, so we want to hire top talent. Is this a top job? Because if it's not, top talent's not going to go for it.
That's almost a daily conversation for me.
So how is it a top job? I mean, if they say yes, it's a top job. How? Tell me how it is so I can tell them, because I'm going to have to talk to them. So you tell me how it's a top job, I'll tell them. I'll find top talent and then tell them how this is a top job. But if this isn't a top job, then I'm not going to find top talent. If this is a bottom job, I might be finding bottom talent. But it puts you in a position where you're now a partner, you're an authority, you're a voice of experience, you're not a servant. And that is the biggest pain point in the difference between sourcing and recruiting, is that recruiters almost always have a customer service mentality. And that's not right. We don't do customer service. It's not on this is not on the PowerPoint, but I will tell you one very important point related to recruiters and sourcers. We are not customer service. We're strategic. And that's why when I opened the conference today, I mentioned the connection between sourcing and strategy. Let me explain what I mean by that. We're in a position where we are the only ones in the organization that can see through the talent pool and the hiring managers and the recruiters. And our customer, let me ask you, who's our customer? Who's your customer? Who is your customer? Who? The hiring manager? No. No. It's the company. Yep, that's your customer. You don't serve the hiring manager because you have many hiring managers. You don't serve the candidate. You have many candidates. I'm not saying to treat hiring managers and candidates like they're not important. I'm saying that they're not your customer. The organization is your customer. So if you put the needs of a hiring manager ahead of the needs of the organization, you've made a fatal mistake that recruiters make. And we have a chance to reinvent our industry and not let that happen. So don't be customer service representatives. Push back when something like that happens. When a manager says, I want top talent, and I'm only willing to pay minimum wage, and not only that, they also have to be able to speak 17 languages and be willing to relocate, and no, we don't have a relocation package. Yeah, well, let me tell you, the reality is that the last 3 offers that we made are 6 times the salary, and we've had to relocate people because this kind of talent doesn't exist in that part of the country. Nobody that does this lives there where you're opening that office. Have that conversation now when you're having the intake meeting, not 6 weeks later when you haven't found any candidates, because 6 weeks later when you haven't had any submittals, you failed. Get it? You failed. Now, before you start, you haven't failed yet. So, think about simple but distinct keywords. What sets somebody aside so that that is a keyword that is almost exclusively used in that particular context? For example, if I say ATS, what do you think of? Right. But do you think that there are other things called ATS? Yes. Automated teller systems. Exactly. So if I use the word ATS, that isn't distinct. In our context it is, but in general it's not. What about if I use applicant tracking system? That's a little bit better. But the reality is, how many of you actually have applicant tracking system on your resume? How many of you have Taleo, iCIMS, whatever on your resume? You know why? The same reason accountants and engineers don't have Java and C++ or SAP on their resume. Because that's what they do. Everybody knows that recruiters use ATSs. So if you're a recruiter, you don't put ATS on your resume. Everybody knows that developers write code. So you're not going to see Java and C++ on their resume. You're going to see other stuff, like what we talked about in the previous session. So what's simple yet distinct separates them from everybody else, identifies them as unique to that particular sector of the industry. Applicant tracking systems, maybe, but what about submit candidates? Who does that? Who submits candidates? Who other than a recruiter or a sourcer or a staffing firm submits candidates? I can't think of anybody that submits candidates. That's a pretty unique set of words. Think of it as Occam's razor. You familiar with Occam's razor? Occam's razor. Franciscan friar William of Occam had this logical argument. He was one of the precursors of the scientific method, the original thinkers around the scientific method. And pretty much in Latin, it says, entia non sunt multiplicanda praeter necessitatem, which translates roughly to, if it's too complicated, you don't need it. Or in other words, the simplest answer is often the best answer. So rather than trying to figure out ways to do long, complex Boolean queries with lots of specialized commands, find that one word, like submit candidate, that is pretty much spot on. And with that one word or one phrase, you'll find all the resumes that you need. Much more than if you try to eliminate a bunch of stuff that is and not, or, and, etc. Think about that. The next is to start with a broad definition, because you never know which way you're going to go. It's a lot easier to narrow down your requirements after you've already started broad than it is to try to expand them when you've started to narrow. It's a lot easier to narrow than it is to expand. So start broad, and you can very quickly narrow. In other words, maybe overreach a little bit, but then scale back, rather than start the other way around. Don't get too specific right off the bat, okay? Hiring manager says they have to have MongoDB and Hadoop and Java and PHP and Drupal. And if you try to search for all of those words, they don't all exist in any one document anywhere on the internet, much less a resume. All those words never appear together. You see what I mean? Unique, abstruse, significant, action verbs, and what appears on the rec that isn't on a resume, or more importantly, what appears on a resume that isn't on the rec. What is on a resume that isn't on a rec? What words or phrases do you see on resumes that do not appear on recs? Java, C++, they're on both. Job titles, both. Okay, that's going a little bit too far, but yeah, you're right. However, in order for me to look for every single name of every single person, which I've done, we had a project I was working on where we had to use the US Census Bureau's list of names for people, and I very quickly found out that there are way too many. Way too many. It's just too many names. It's not a viable keyword. But I like how you're thinking, so keep going with that. What else? Where else would you go? It's on a resume.
Companies of the candidate.
Oh, okay, but that wouldn't be on the requirements?
No.
Maybe, yeah, no, okay, not so much. Maybe not. Okay. But aren't there like a lot of companies? I mean, last I checked, ZoomInfo, there were like 3 million companies. So that's a lot of names too. Not as many as people's names. But keep going, you're getting closer. Warmer, warmer. Come on, keep going. What's only on a resume?
Not a keyword, but stability of a candidate.
Years of experience is one of those things. How about the word present? Have you seen the word present on a resume? No?
Yes.
It's pretty common. Maybe not in every resume, but it's in a lot of them. It's usually either present or till date or to current. Those are the different variations, but present is like predominantly the biggest one. So that's something that will be on, so if you've got a company name, Microsoft, a job title or something related to I write code, wrote code, lines of code, and then the word present, it's probably a resume, right? So this is kind of repeating what we talked about. Best search strings that you create are going to include common job titles, company names, jargon, which is skills, keywords, and phrases, and natural language, and all the stuff we just previously talked about, and geography, which is not always necessary, but good to have. I will tell you that even if you have a global, worldwide search, it's always better to start with geography. Why? Because it's easier to eliminate the places you've already been to. In other words, let's take the United States. If you're doing a search in Wisconsin and you've eliminated all the results from Wisconsin, you can safely move to Montana. But if you try to do a search for all of the United States all at once, it's a lot harder to filter through. So you might as well knock out the geographies. What I usually do is I try to figure out where that talent pool actually is. And what I do is I'll go to Indeed. I think I might even have that on here. Nope, it's the next one. There we go. So what you do is you go to Indeed or Simply Hired and you try to find jobs for that skill, right? So you go in there and you type in certified, what's the CISSP, security one, CISS, Certified Internet Security, whatever it is. CISSP, you type that in, and what comes up are a list of locations where there's a lot of jobs posted for CISSP. The assumption here is, walk with me on this, if there's a lot of job openings for CISSPs, reason would have it, there are probably a lot of CISSPs that work in those cities. So you'll see Boston, Atlanta, New York, those are the cities where you go first, even if your search is nationwide. Because once you knock those out, the rest of the world becomes a little bit smaller. The same thing applies with companies. You can also get a list of companies. You put in CISSP and you'll get all the companies that have job postings, the same idea. If the company is hiring CISSPs, they probably employ CISSPs. That might not be the case, but more often it is.
There would be certain market analysis that is done. And
Yes.
Career Builder is one of them where it puts up the data.
And guess what they use? Job postings. Guess what Indeed is? Job postings. Yep, same thing. If you are stuck with technology or words that don't quite, so you have terms or terminology that isn't coming up, I'll give you an example. Do you know what hibernate is? It's something bears do.
Yeah, hibernate.
You see what I mean? Yeah. Google hibernate. Not going to get a lot of developers. You'll get a lot of people talking about bears, though. So sometimes you have a term like that where the term itself is just a bad keyword. It gives you too many false positives. What do? Well, you can use the one-look reverse dictionary and describe the concept and have that come back with a list of keywords that are similar in that context. So if you tried hibernate, yeah, you'll get some bear terminology, but you'll also get Hadoop and MongoDB, etc. So that's a, kind of a little end around, if you will. What I'm giving you here is what happens when you don't have access to the hiring manager. You can't talk to the hiring manager, so you can't confirm that Hadoop and MongoDB are good. But you can at least guesstimate, because if you see hibernate, you know that hibernate is also these other things, and you look for that as well. You don't have access to the hiring manager, so you don't have a choice. You have to kind of go at it blind, in a way, until you can confirm with the hiring manager, which would be better. But if you can't, because some of you said you work with a recruiter, good luck trying to get this from the recruiter. They probably don't know what hibernate is in the first place. Really. You think that's funny? I'll give you an example. I'm working with this client. I can't tell you who it is, but they're a very big government contractor. Big. One of the top 3. I just can't tell you which one. And one of the top recruiters, researchers, comes up with this example. And she says, I've been working on this rec for a couple of weeks now. And mind you, she was one of the best, or is probably still one of the best recruiters in the business. So I'm not talking about somebody who was a rookie here. She says, I'm used to, when I get involved in a search, I usually turn up candidates within the first 24 hours. But I've been working on this for 2 weeks, and I haven't been able to get a single resume that the hiring manager liked. I've sent him 3 resumes, but he's rejected them categorically, just like, nope. In fact, not just no, but why can't you find what I'm looking for? Like no with prejudice. Like angry no. She was looking for Maximo. You know what Maximo is? Maximo, for those of you that don't know, is a facilities management software. The company Maximo was acquired by a company called Tivoli, who was then subsequently acquired by a company called IBM. So Maximo Facilities Management is now called IBM Facilities Management. When the hiring manager had the job that we're currently recruiting for 15 years ago, the product was called Maximo Facilities Management. So that's what was in the rec. So the first question I asked is, what's Maximo? And she goes, well, I don't know. Okay, let's figure that out. So I did a Google search. First thing that came up was Maximo Facilities Management. Mind you, she had typed Maximo into her ATS, and what she ended up getting were a lot of Maximo Rodriguez kinds of candidates. Not a fit. So instead, I come back and said, well, it looks like this is the same thing as IBM facilities management. Maybe we should ask the hiring manager if that's the case. So good recruiter that she was, and she was very well respected within the organization, calls the hiring manager on the cell phone. Hiring manager answers. And she says, so Bob, we're doing some research trying to figure out why we can't come up with any candidates. Would you be willing to take a look at anybody that has IBM facilities management instead of Maximo? Guess what the hiring manager said? Of course, that's what we use now. So you think it's funny, but it's not. It happens all the time to the best recruiters. You have to just figure it out for yourself if you can't talk to the hiring manager. So here's a few others. We talked about some of these. ZoomInfo I mentioned earlier today. Indeed, these are just places where you can go and conduct research. But I'll give you one that you might not know about, which is the Google related command. When you go on Google and you type in related : and then the website of a particular company, say related:wepro.com, what Google will return is a list of 100 or so websites that have statistically similar content. Effectively, it's a list of competitors, in a way. It brings back a list of other companies that have somewhat similar content on their websites. So it'll be like all the other consulting firms in technology. Type in related : Dell and you'll get HP and Intel and etc. Job titles you can get from Simply Hired and Indeed as well. You can also get that from LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a really good place to find job titles. You know why? When people put their personal information on LinkedIn, oftentimes they use the commonly accepted job title, not the corporate job title. So instead of like Systems Engineer 3, they put in Programmer. So it's a kind of a sterilized job title that isn't the corporate friendly one. So it's a good place to do that. You can also go to databases like Jigsaw, which is now data.com, and look up by industry and sector and location and see a list of job titles. Don't look for job titles. Look for industry and level or whatever. Oil and gas in Denver, and then operations, and then you'll get the job titles. You can use those keywords. As far as target companies, don't go crazy. You really don't need that many. 10, 20 at the most. Company names. You don't really know. Once you exhaust those, hey, you exhausted the 20, fine, go get some more. But you don't really need to do a research project to uncover all the names of all the companies that have potentially similar. No, start with the top 10. You don't need to go too far. And also, don't forget to use email domains. If my email address is shally.steckerl@mot.com, where do I work? Motorola. Doesn't matter what's on my resume. On my resume, for example, could have On Semiconductor, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Motorola. I work for Motorola, but the division I work with is called On Semiconductor. My email address, however, is still mot.com. So there's other examples: hp.com, ibm.com, in.ibm.com. You get where I'm going with that? For jargon, don't forget about abbreviations and licenses. Things like certifications or even degrees. Now, you might think to yourself, how does that work? What is the computer science degree? What's the abbreviation? Sorry. For C? Here? Okay. And what about in the US? BSCS? There's at least 13 of them. There's BSCS, there's B_S_C, which is also a bachelor's in computer science. There's BSCE, which is computer engineering, but some people still consider that computer science because that school is offering computer science under the engineering department. There's 13 of them. So even something as straightforward as you would think, oh, Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science, BSCS, it still has 12 other definitions, 12 other variations. So think about that. right? Okay, so the pattern you would search for is 9180 Bangalore. That's your keywords. Does that make sense? Or 9170, which I don't know if that exists or whatever, and then the name of that city, right? Internationally. When you do a search, make sure that your search doesn't exceed 1,000 results. In fact, you want to aim for about 250. This is specifically with search engines, not so much with an ATS. In your ATS, the limit is usually set by the system. So if you ever use like brass ring, Conexa brass ring, it won't return more than 1,000 results. I think it'll say 5,000 plus, but basically it won't return more than 1,000. However, when you go on Google, this is very, very important. When you go on Bing, don't exceed 1,000. You know why?
Everything of 1,000 is like maybe duplicated or it's not there.
Nefarious. It may be there, but you'll never know because you can never see results past 1,000. Google will never share results past 1,000. So what happens is if your search brings back more than 1,000 results, the content that you really, really, really want might be in page 200, page 300 results, and you'll never be able to get to it. So the search that you do should always bring back less than 1,000 results. Then you know that it's accurate enough. Ideally, 250. And I say 250 loosely because it could be 300. Look, if you're doing a search and you get 321, don't call me and be like, it's okay if I really get somewhere around 250. Okay? 200, 300. Texting me, hey, Shally, I got 372. Can I still click? No. The point is, if you get about 250 results and you stick to the quality quotient of 50% of them should be something that you'd want to click on. So you get a page of results, let's say 10, and out of those 10, glancing through, it looks like 5 of those are something you would click on. I'm not telling you to do it, I'm just saying look at this list of results, and if 5 or more of those look like something you might be interested in, that's 50%. If you get 250 results at 50% quality, that means you're going to probably end up with about 125 leads. In my experience in 18 years managing the world's largest sourcing teams, I can track about 147 leads to hire globally, all industries, everywhere in the world. So if you have 147 leads, chances are pretty good you're going to make a hire. That's leads, not candidates. Leads doesn't mean candidates. So 250 divided by half, it's a pretty good chance you're probably going to get a hire from that. You don't need more than 250. You definitely don't want to exceed more than 1,000 because then you're not going to get all the good results. Then, the last thing, how much time do we have left? Huh? Oh, well, I'm going to need to show them this because this is the last one. All right, so the last one is bring those resumes of the perfect candidate, and you take all 3 of them or 4 of them or 5 of them and copy the text, all of the text from all of those 5 resumes into one file and paste that file on this website and do what's called a phrase analysis. You can pick 2 or 3 word phrases. And the top 10 phrases that come back are eerily accurate. And more than likely, they will be non-technical. So if I were to do this right now and I showed you the resumes of 5 technical project managers at Facebook. Sorry, bro. 5 technical project managers at Facebook. And I did this, I copied all their text, I put it into the right words, and I did a selection of the top 2 phrases, the top 5 phrases of 2 and the top 5 phrases of 3. The kind of things that would come back are not jargon. It's normal, natural, everyday English words. Here's the freaky part. The freaky part is if you search for all of those words and just those words, you get nothing but resumes. Why is that? Mind blown. Why is that? Why is it if I get the top 5 phrases from the top 5 resumes and I search for those phrases, all I'm going to get for results are resumes? Profiles, LinkedIn profiles, bios, whatever. Doesn't have to be called resume. Because if 5 people use the same 5 keywords, it doesn't matter what keywords they are.
Maybe they're already doing the similar
Doesn't matter. It'll be like, for example, technical, systems, planning, managed, and administration. Totally random. But you do that, you search for those words, and everything that comes back is spot on. It's creepy, but it works. Why? Because if something is frequent enough that it comes up 5 times in 5 resumes, high probability that it's something related to something that they do in the context of what they do that is not a natural phrase, that is still an organic keyword. And it'll come up. Now, use those same 5 words on an ATS or LinkedIn or Monster, and the results are spectacular. You get extremely accurate results with thousands of company names and job titles that are not even close to the ones on your list. Why? Because those 5 people, those 5 resumes that you use as samples happen to have the same words, and that indicates a pattern, a very rigid pattern that will only exist with other resumes like that. And it won't be technical jargon. So I encourage you to play with that. Writewords.org.uk, word count ASP. Question?
So can you come up with some more examples of what you have done analysis on those kind of research on this one?
Yeah, one time I was working on a really hard to find engineering spec. The company wanted people that had experience doing telemetric Flutter engineering or Flutter test engineering. Basically, these are telemetric connections to supersonic airplanes, jets, and they're measuring the stress on the wing during flight, which you can't measure in a wind tunnel. You have to be going Mach 3 or Mach 4 in order to do this. The skill is very, very rare, and nobody ever goes to school for that. Nobody, because it's just so specialized. It's a specific combination of physics, math, and engineering, structural and mechanical engineering, with a lot of physics. And then you've got the telemetry part, right? Handful of people in the world actually do this job. But the most interesting thing happened when I put in the resumes of 5 previous candidates that had received offers. The words that I got back were scarily common words. Flight, engine, telemetric or telemetrics or something like that, and a couple of others that were not at all like what you would think. One of them was vessel. I remember that, vessel. All of my searches up until that point included jet, scramjet, propulsion, airplane, blah, blah, blah. It never occurred to me to look for the word vessel. But that was the word that all 5 people used in reference to the ship. It's a vessel. It's not in the wreck. But they all 5 used the word vessel. That blew my mind. And that's where I came up with this. It just, out of the blue, I see this word vessel. It wasn't in the rec. I would have never thought about talking to the hiring manager, hey, does the word vessel appear? So when I think of vessel, I think like, drinking vessel. That's stuff like that comes up. And I can, from there I can mention hundreds of examples like that. Just really weird, creepy combinations of words that you're just like, what? But it works incredibly accurately. So last resort, if you can't talk to the hiring manager. Obviously, forget this if you can talk to the hiring manager. But if you don't, this is what you end up having no choice but to do. Make sense? All right. Well, I guess we're out of time, and as usual, I'm kicking the next person, making him late. How much time did I steal from him?
Thank you, Shally, for the